these great big imposing doors on this church. Do they look welcoming to you? Well, maybe if you're a member of this church, they're welcoming because you've been through them on many happy occasions. But what do they look like to outsiders? That was a question that was answered yesterday at several churches in Peoria on Pentecost Sunday. Peoria decided to have its first ever sanctioned marathon race, road race, on Pentecost Sunday. And apparently it closed down all or parts of roads in front of at least 20 churches in Peoria, including this one. And so churches reacted to that in all different kinds of ways. One church completely canceled all 3 of their masses on Sunday morning. Another church, a Presbyterian church, decided that people would not be able to get there on Sunday morning, but they planned a wonderful, worshipful, celebrative event for the evening. And so they had a jazz service last evening at 5 o'clock to accommodate their members and any of their friends who would like to come. Well, this church was on the route, the street that you can hear behind us. This was part of the route of the marathon. And they canceled an early service because they weren't sure that people would be able to get here, but had their regular 10 o'clock worship service. Just before that service, several church members were standing out on the street cheering for the runners who were going by. This was apparently about mile 18 or 19. I've never run a marathon, but I understand that's when it gets really, really hard. And so several of us were standing out here cheering for people as they went by. One of the people who was standing out here was a choir member who also has run in road races. And she said to us at about 10 minutes before worship was to begin, wouldn't it be great if we sang to them as they went by? And our first hymn is Every Time I Feel the Spirit. So with a little bit of warning, what happened was that the whole choir of this church stood right here where I am and sang that first hymn, Every Time I Feel the Spirit. And the hundreds of people who were gathered in that sanctuary turned around and sang in this direction. I stood where I could see what was happening, and as the runners went by, kind of one at a time on the street out there, they were waving to us and cheering for us. They were so happy that we had opened up the door and included them even in a little part of the worship service. So here's a question for your session. If something were going to happen in your town or in your county or in your neighborhood that was going to make it hard for people to get to worship on a Sunday morning, what would you do? How would you accommodate that? How would you react to something different happening in your town that made it a little bit out of the ordinary for you to worship? What would you do? I thought this was a great example of what Pentecost was all about. Surely there were a few runners who went by here yesterday who thought those people are crazy, just like they thought on that first Pentecost in Jerusalem. But what this congregation decided to do was not worry about whether people thought they were crazy or not, but to share the good news of God's love with people in their community who needed to hear it.